Welcome to Revenge by Peta, where love turns cold, family turns cruel, and revenge quietly begins. On this channel, we bring you cinematic stories of betrayal, heartbreak, and justice served cold. From family secrets and toxic in-laws to shocking betrayals and karma delivered with precision. These are stories you'll never forget. We upload twice weekly, Wednesdays for love and betrayal stories and Sundays for family revenge tales. Every story is designed to captivate, reflect, and remind you. Revenge isn't evil. Sometimes it's balance. If you've ever been betrayed or know someone who has, you're in the right place. Subscribe, stay tuned, and step into the world where silence speaks louder than vengeance.
It all began the day I returned from NYSC, expecting nothing more than the quiet hum of my childhood home. I didn't knock. I didn't announce myself. I simply stepped into the dining room, the same room where my father used to tell stories after dinner. But this time, the air was thick, heavy, almost suffocating. Something was wrong. And there she was, my mother, sitting at the head of the table, a folder in her hands, guarded like it contained the world's greatest secret. My aunt froze mid-step, my cousin's eyes dropped. The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing closer, and then my mother turned toward me, not surprised, not angry, just inconvenienced. "You're early," she said softly, almost a whisper, yet sharp enough to cut through the tension. Beside her, a document rested in the folder, its edges crisp, its presence ominous. I stepped closer, my pulse quickening. My breath caught. A single phrase screamed from the page. Last will and testament. Someone behind me murmured, "She wasn't supposed to be here." And that's when the reality hit me. NYSC hadn't kept me away. It hadn't saved me from the betrayal that had been quietly brewing, carefully orchestrated in my absence. My mother, my own blood, was part of it, or at least complicit in something I could not yet name. That moment, frozen in disbelief and quiet terror, would mark the first beat in a series of betrayals I hadn't even imagined. And I knew, somewhere deep in my chest, that the person I trusted most had already begun to rewrite everything I thought was mine. I leaned against the doorway, my uniform still crisp, sunlight catching the edge of my sleeve. Memories of this house came flooding back. The laughter, the warmth, the quiet moments my father had carved out just for me. But those moments felt like echoes now, distant and fragile. My mother's cold demeanor had been present for years, but I had buried it under duty, under obedience. I remembered my father's quiet guidance, a hand on my shoulder, a whisper in my ear, small affirmations that somehow kept me afloat. But his absence left space for manipulation. The will had always been my father's way of ensuring fairness, a safeguard my mother seemed to resent. And now, seeing it guarded like contraband, I realized the truth. Someone wanted to erase me, my rights, my existence. I walked to the table, careful, silent. My aunt hovered nearby, unsure whether to intervene or step back. I caught her eye and she looked away. She knew things, too. Everyone knew. And yet no one spoke. My mother's smile was thin, practiced. "We weren't expecting you until next week. NYSC should have kept you busy." I swallowed, trying to steady the tightness in my chest. NYSC had not saved me from this. Nothing had. The betrayal was patient, slow, and meticulously planned. And for the first time, I understood that survival meant observation, calculation, and patience. Weeks later, the first betrayal revealed itself quietly, insidiously. I had returned home one evening to find that my father's savings account, my safety net, had been closed. "Unnecessary," my mother said, stirring soup like it was nothing. No explanation, no apology, just a soft, dismissive shrug. I felt the sting of disbelief, sharp as glass. My father had labored tirelessly to secure that account, to ensure I had a buffer, a chance. And she, my mother, erased it without a second thought. The betrayal was small, yet calculated. It was a first cut, testing my reaction, my resolve. I did not argue. I could not. Anger would have fed her sense of control. Instead, I watched, noted, and filed it away. Every word, every gesture, every small deception would become part of a larger plan. I began paying attention to details, to inconsistencies, to the subtle ways my family hid truths in plain sight. I realized then that betrayal was not a single event. It was a series of movements, deliberate, quiet, and precise, and I would need to move just as deliberately to survive it. It was the night of a family gathering meant to honor my father's memory. Everyone was dressed, polite, restrained, but my mother wielded control like a weapon. She laughed dismissively when asked about me. She can't handle anything on her own. Always overwhelmed. The words pierced deeper than I expected. My cousin avoided my eyes. My aunt shuffled papers nervously. And my brother, my younger brother, her golden child, smirked. Humiliation spread like a cold fog. It wasn't just about words. It was about reputation, perception, and the careful orchestration of power. She had set the stage for me to fail publicly, to feel small. And I did momentarily until I remembered my father's teachings. Observation before reaction, patience before retaliation. I left that evening with more than embarrassment. I left with clarity. The betrayal was deliberate. The humiliation calculated. And I would not be caught unprepared again. 2 weeks into NYSC, my phone vibrated with a call from an unfamiliar number. "Peter, your father's wife. She has moved into your mother's shops." My heart froze. Not the shops, but what they represented. Legacy, inheritance, history. I had thought NYSC kept me away from this chaos, but the betrayal had followed me, creeping silently across distance. The details trickled in like shards of ice. My mother's name erased, staff replaced, signboards gone. The world I had known, the family I trusted, was being rewritten in my absence. The first layer of betrayal had been personal. This second was strategic, targeting my security, my inheritance, my claim to what should have been mine. And I realized then that I could not fight emotionally. I needed strategy, patience, observation. Every step I took would have to be deliberate, silent, precise. Back in my NYSC camp, I sat alone, studying the limited information I had. Every message, every story, every whispered detail was a puzzle piece. The betrayals had escalated from subtle to strategic, and I was only beginning to understand the scope. I plodded quietly, taking mental notes. Who could be trusted? Who was complicit? Every word my mother had said, every glance from my aunt, every hesitation from my cousin became data. I realized revenge would not be loud. It would not be violent. It would be methodical. Each betrayal, each slight, each stolen opportunity would become a step in my path toward restoring what was rightfully mine. Patience became my ally. Silence my shield. Observation my weapon. And in that quiet I vowed, when the time came, I would not just reclaim what was taken. I would expose it, dismantle it, and rise above it. Late one evening, back in the quiet of my NYSC quarters, I sifted through old letters, photographs, and small mementos my father had left me. Something felt off. A folded envelope, tucked beneath a stack of letters, bore my mother's handwriting. The edges were worn, the ink faded, but the words promised guidance. "Peter, if you ever find this, it means life has moved faster than I had planned. Trust only what is written, not what is said." A shiver ran down my spine. It was subtle yet powerful. She had foreseen betrayal, documented it, and left instructions. I read every line carefully, committing each nuance to memory. Observation was key. I realized that even my father's silence was deliberate. There were layers to betrayal I had yet to uncover. Small deceptions, seemingly insignificant gestures, all contributing to the larger plan against me. By the time I finished reading, I had begun to map the network of deceit. Every name, every place, every hidden transaction would matter. Betrayal was no longer abstract. It was measurable, tangible. And now, armed with my mother's guidance, I had a path forward. I returned home under the guise of an emergency leave. The house was quiet, almost deceptively so. From the road, I observed. The shops were bustling, but the signboards bore names that were no longer familiar. My mother's branding had been erased, replaced by a new, sterile identity. From a distance, I noticed a file on a shelf, guarded, conspicuous, almost taunting. My father's gaze met mine from a window. He did not smile. He did not greet me. He simply watched, calculating. The first stirrings of fear appeared, not in me, but in them. I had arrived silently, unannounced, yet they sensed my presence. I had become the shadow moving through their carefully constructed narrative. That night, I studied the property records from afar, making mental notes. Every erased name, every altered document, every misfiled receipt revealed cracks in their deception. And I knew patience and observation would be my greatest allies. A week later, a trusted family acquaintance whispered to me that my father had secretly transferred funds intended for my mother's businesses into accounts controlled jointly by him and the woman who had moved in. Shock surged through me, not because of the theft, but because it had been deliberate, calculated, and hidden. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was emotional. My mother's legacy was being dismantled while everyone pretended nothing had changed. I remained calm. My heart tightened, but I said nothing. I knew my silence was stronger than outrage. The betrayal had escalated from subtle manipulation to deliberate erasure. I began cataloging each irregularity, tracing every account, every transaction, every document. Each discovery sharpened my resolve. This was no longer about survival. It was about reclaiming justice, piece by piece. Observation turned into quiet intervention. At home, I noticed minor inconsistencies, misfiled receipts, a ledger that didn't balance, staff unsure of instructions. Every error was a crack in the armor of deception. I began documenting them discreetly, taking photos and making notes. Each small victory, each piece of evidence, felt like the first drops of rain before a storm. The subtlety was intoxicating. They believed they controlled everything, yet their own mistakes whispered the truth. I felt a surge of quiet satisfaction, tempered by the knowledge that the major betrayal was still to come. Late one evening, my aunt, long overlooked and cautious, slipped a note under my door. She knows more than you realize, but do not confront yet. Watch and wait. Her words confirmed my suspicions. Not everyone was aligned against me. Some were complicit. Some were constrained. She had seen the patterns, the small betrayals, the calculated manipulations. We met briefly in secret. Her voice trembled as she detailed discrepancies in property titles, hidden transactions, and subtle manipulation by my father and the woman. I listened, committing every detail to memory. Patience remained key. My plan needed precision. Allies were valuable, but timing was everything. The final betrayal would not just expose them. It would undo years of deception. I returned home under the pretense of a casual visit. My mother's rival and my father were present, confident, smug. I did not greet. I did not react. I observed. A misplaced ledger drew my attention. Their eyes followed mine. Subtle tension rippled through the room. They were aware, yet unprepared. I made no accusations. I simply asked innocuous questions about ownership, about past transactions. Their hesitation, fleeting as it was, revealed guilt. The first cracks had appeared. It was subtle, yet it marked the beginning of the shift. The stage was set. Betrayal had been identified, small victories logged, alliances formed. The quiet war had begun, and the first confrontation, though calm, sent ripples of fear through the room. Back at the family business, I noticed small yet deliberate manipulations. Invoices shuffled, suppliers misinformed, minor errors that caused delays. Nothing catastrophic, just enough to test my patience and gauge my awareness. I smiled quietly to myself. They believed I was unaware, that my time away in NYSC kept me distant. But I observed. I catalogued. Every subtle sabotage became evidence of their intent to control, to humiliate, and to erase my mother's legacy. By evening, I had compiled a mental map of their actions. The pattern was clear. Every move was orchestrated, every betrayal measured. I realized that small betrayals often revealed greater plans. They were preparing for something bigger, but I was already ahead. One night, I received an anonymous text. "Stop digging. Some things are better left buried." It was both a threat and a confirmation. They knew I was watching. They were aware that patience was my weapon. And yet, the note inadvertently revealed fear. I responded silently, not with words, but with careful observation. Their overconfidence was faltering. Their control, though seemingly total, had cracks. Each whisper of warning became a clue. Another thread in the tapestry I was slowly unraveling. A former employee approached me cautiously during my next visit home. "They don't know you're onto the missing contracts, but they're nervous. Your father has been making secret transfers, and she is hiding something in plain sight." I nodded, absorbing the information silently. This wasn't a confrontation. It was reconnaissance. Every ally, every tip, every whispered warning sharpened my strategy. I realized that patience would not only reveal their betrayals, it would make them unravel under their own arrogance. I arranged a casual family gathering, ostensibly to celebrate a minor occasion. My father and his accomplice entered confident, smug, unaware that I had cross-referenced every transaction, every document, every ledger's entry. I asked subtle questions, observing reactions. The woman flinched at a mention of certain account numbers. My father adjusted his tie nervously. Small betrayals surfaced in micro-expressions, stuttered words, and fleeting hesitations. I said nothing loudly, yet the message was clear. I was present, I knew, and I was documenting everything. The first tremors of fear had begun. Late at night, I returned to the old clay kitchen behind the house, a place my mother had always called sacred. Among soot-darkened walls and old clay pots, I discovered a hidden compartment, envelopes, receipts, bank statements, contracts, all bearing my mother's signature, carefully archived for my protection. My heart pounded. She had left me a roadmap, anticipating betrayal, predicting their moves. The third betrayal, the ultimate exposure, was within reach. But it had to be executed methodically. Haste would ruin the plan. The next few days revealed more mini-betrayals. The woman misreporting stock, my father forging minor signatures, cousins withholding information. Each act seemed insignificant to them, but formed a mosaic of deceit I could now reconstruct. I documented, photographed, and cross-referenced each detail. Their arrogance was my advantage. They believed the past was buried, yet each small betrayal unnoticed by them was a weapon in my hands. Every smile, every casual word, every friendly gesture hid subtle deception. By now, I was certain the final confrontation would not only expose their actions, it would dismantle their carefully curated illusion of control. It all began to unravel the morning I returned to observe the family business again. My father and the woman had moved swiftly, consolidating assets, erasing my mother's name wherever possible. But this time, they underestimated the depth of my preparation. I noticed an innocuous folder on the side table, a document left slightly open, exposing forged papers attempting to transfer ownership to themselves. This was the final betrayal, the one that would have robbed me of everything. My pulse tightened. I understood immediately. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the culmination of years of planning and silent observation. No one knew I had already cross-checked every account, every document. Their arrogance would be their undoing. They had revealed the truth by trying to bury it, leaving breadcrumbs straight to their deceit. I returned to my quarters, sitting in the dim light, the folder spread before me. I observed, planned, and allowed the adrenaline to settle into calm strategy. Every action from this point forward had to be deliberate. Small betrayals became tools. Misstatements, errors, fleeting hesitations, they all indicated exactly where pressure would expose weakness. I traced the path of deception, noting the points where they had overreached. Their pride had made them sloppy, and I would exploit it with precision. Patience was my weapon. Silence my shield, observation my sword. I returned to the family business under the guise of a routine visit, blending in with staff, noting interactions. Micro-expressions revealed hidden tension. Casual questions elicited hesitations. I positioned myself subtly, gaining access to the critical areas they assumed I would never inspect. Every drawer, every shelf, every ledger became a potential revelation. The weight of anticipation was almost physical. I could feel the inevitability of confrontation growing closer. By evening, I had everything I needed. Evidence, timelines, corroborating documents, all aligned to expose the full spectrum of betrayal. The night before the confrontation, I prepared mentally. I revisited my mother's letters, the hidden documents, and my own meticulous records. I rehearsed every step, every phrase, every strategic pause. My heartbeat was steady, my mind razor-sharp. Tomorrow, silence would speak louder than confrontation. Tomorrow, their arrogance and deceit would be laid bare. I arrived early at the family meeting. Chairs were filled with my father, the woman, and unsuspecting relatives. I placed the evidence, contracts, affidavits, bank statements, audio recordings, on the table, each item deliberate and visible. The room stiffened, eyes widened, smiles faltered. My father's confident posture wavered. The woman's mask of control cracked. I began calmly, "Let's review the truth from the beginning." Each document, each revelation landed with weight, exposing subtle and grand betrayals alike. The audio recordings played. The contracts, meticulously signed by my mother, proved rightful ownership and intention. Bank statements revealed siphoned funds. Every forgery, every manipulation was traceable. Their attempts to interject failed. Their lies, once silent, now screamed. The third major betrayal, their final attempt to erase me, had been fully documented. Their arrogance crumbled under the quiet power of evidence. I spoke calmly. "Everything you tried to hide, everything you thought was safe is now visible." The room went silent. Even the relatives, previously complicit by silence, could only watch. The law confirmed my mother's intentions. Ownership, legacy, and dignity were restored. I did not celebrate loudly. I did not gloat. I simply observed. The woman and my father's accomplices were powerless, their pride and manipulation undone. The lesson was clear. Revenge is not chaos or shouting. It is patience, strategy, and intelligence. I reflected quietly, looking at the legacy my mother had entrusted me with. Self-worth cannot be stolen. Boundaries must be honored, and justice is best served through calm, calculated action. I left the room, the weight of resolution heavy yet liberating. My mother's name, her love, her wisdom, restored. Silence had spoken louder than vengeance. If you're still watching, hit the like button. Subscribe for next week's story. You're watching Revenge by Peta, where silence speaks louder than vengeance.
Thank you for watching Revenge by Peta. Remember, in a world of deceit and betrayal, justice doesn't always shout, sometimes it whispers. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any cinematic tale of love gone cold or family betrayal. Share your thoughts in the comments, and remember, revenge is not about hate, it's about restoring balance. This was Revenge by Peta, where silence speaks louder than vengeance.